Welcome to I Change the Narrative, a podcast for and about Black men inspiring, supporting, and empowering Black men and Black boys. Today, we're talking about co-parenting or shared parenting, as I like to call it. But before we get started with the conversation, I want to ask our guests to tell us about yourself and the work that you're involved in that lends itself to the topic or the lived experience. We're going to start off with Dr. Lawrence.
Hello. How y'all doing? My name is Dr. Lawrence Jackson. I am a couple and family therapist by trade. I am a past assistant professor at UNLV within the School of Medicine for Couple and Family Therapy, and I currently have a private practice working with individuals, couples, and families. I go by the name at the Black Male Therapist on social media, particularly Instagram, where I have something called Black Therapy Fridays, where I try to drop a little tidbits I think can help everybody navigate the rest of their week and give them a little boost. In addition to that, I have a clothing line to further normalize mental health. And I recently have been doing some work within professional sports, particularly with NBA and NFL, but most recently NBA, working with the NBA G League team, Motor City Cruise, affiliated with Detroit Pistons. In addition to that work, I do some work with the Gottman Institute as well, within a relationship blog. One of my pieces that I wrote was about building trust with teenagers that kind of highlights some of the stuff we maybe we talk about today, as well as working with many families, navigating the challenges and the triumphs with co-parenting and trying to make that blended family work as well.
Thank you. Coach Anthony.
That's awesome, brother. I am Coach Anthony Johnson. I am a life coach, co-parenting coach, and leadership consultant. I'm a military veteran, 19 years of military service. I did 15 years in the Army before I transferred to the Air Force. I was an officer in the Army and the Air Force. I did a lot of instructing and in the Army leadership training. I was a instructor for officer candidate school for the Army. I started my business, doing coaching and consulting because it's just what I love to do. And I started doing leadership stuff. And I always find myself talking about fatherhood. Whenever I did a workshop on leadership, fatherhood was always one of my main topics, because it's my most important job, my most important leadership role. So I do a lot of mentoring in high schools, colleges, and I just love what I do. So I'm the co-parenting coach on TikTok and on Instagram, AJ, the co-parenting coach. And I just recently wrote my first book on co-parenting. It's called It's Not About You. My 10 principles for what I think is a solid co-parenting foundation.
Thank you so much. Gentlemen, your words and your wisdom change outcomes, and I thank you for being a part of that today. This episode of I Change the Narrative is powered by So Organic, So Suave, also known as Sauce. Sauce is a luxury hair care and skincare refuge for those with thick hair and melanin-rich skin, from healthy beard growth to top-of-head hairstyling to an illuminating skincare regimen. Sauce Essentials will naturally enhance your outer appearance to strengthen your inner confidence. Sauce invites you to accept the authenticity and real self-care and embrace your best. You can find Sauce's award-winning grooming essentials online at sossd.co. Again, that's sossd.co. You can also follow Sauce on Instagram, and for the latest in product news and updates at sossd.co. Elevate your grooming with Sauce today. So, gentlemen, shared parenting begins with understanding your value in the lives of your children. When parents consider their co-parenting relationship as negative, child outcomes suffer. So let's get into it. I'm not going to go through a long intro about co-parenting because this is just a very important subject, and I think we just need to get right into it. So tell us, gentlemen, anyone can go for this. First, what is co-parenting or shared parenting?
So I think when you think about the word co-parenting, I think it's kind of like co-leader, co-support, right? It's two parents really supporting the lifespan and development of young children and kiddos, whatever their ages may be, right? Sometimes that can be brought in from them being married and then navigating that process or being together in some form of fashion. Sometimes it's brought in more in a blended family when there may be a bonus parent of some sort that's kind of helped them try to navigate. I think when we think about parenting in particular, I think it's important to recognize that we typically have a parenting experiences from our own upbringings. We bring our values, the way that we view things, our beliefs into how we think our parenting should look like. And that's all good and dandy if we all have the same, but the reality is that we all grew up in different experiences. And navigating those two different entities is sometimes can be a challenge for parents. And so really trying to help them navigate that journey so they can best support their kids when they both have the most likely or multiple, right? They both have those positive things in mind. And so trying to help them navigate what that looks like for them as a whole. Coach, what you got?
And just to break it down to like its simplest form, it's really just two people trying to parent and raise children from two separate homes, really, and I have a Facebook group for co-parenting fathers, and I always thought about it in a traditional sense of, all right, we were in a relationship or we had a child together and, we broke up or, for some reason we're not together, we're trying to parent. All right. But I have had people request to be in my Facebook group that are searching for people to have a child with. So, so they can co-parent together. So it can also include that group of people who, who get together and try to have a child together because they, one person can't have one or something, and they're trying to raise that kid together. So they're going to have to co-parent as well.
Wow. That's new for me. Thank you for that. What are the biggest misconceptions about Black fathers in this shared parenting space?
I'll start. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that they're not around, right? Like that there's no presence, there's no Black fatherhood presence. The Black fathers are out there and they are present, and they are, they're very active in their child's lives. I think recent studies show that they're more active than, they're one of the most active demographics among fathers is Black fathers. And so I think that's one of the common misconceptions that you see, just like the absent Black dad, right? That's not like they may, even if they're not together, like Black dads they're showing up for their kids. So I think that's a comment that I've seen.
Yeah, Coach Anthony, I agree. I think that is something that is very prevalent within our society today, right? With the belief system that Black fathers are absent, and it's not true. It's absolutely not true, and the research does highlight that. I think another thing I think is important to kind of highlight as well is that, Black fathers or Black men are not in tune with their emotional experience. And so they can't relate to some of their challenges that our kids may experience because we have to deal in this mindset of we got to tough it up. We got to be twice as good. We can't show that vulnerability or weakness. And one of the things I have found in a lot of the work that I do, particularly working with professional athletes, right? They want to show that vulnerability, right? We think about the Kobe Bryants, right? I'm a girl dad. There's so much pride behind that and really embodying that experience. And so I think some of those things coming as well is that we know as Black fathers, we can't be emotionally vulnerable or we can't show that side because our kids learn from us, right? And so we can't be emotionally vulnerable for our children, then our children's not going to learn that as well. And that's going to influence how they live their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. How has co-parenting changed over the last 10 years or so?
I think we have changed what we view as the paradigm shift. I think is related to what includes that. As Coach Anthony mentioned, like, hey, we got people that's coming in the group that are trying to look for parenting, right? And so I think we kind of have viewed co-parenting as like, okay, it's a mom and a dad, and that's how it's going to work, right? But it could be a mom and a mom or dad and a dad, right? There's so much more that can come into play as we begin to be more normalized in our society and recognize the importance of upbringing and what that support could look like and how that can kind of just continue to grow and be navigated within our society. And so I think one of the way just we even look at the word itself, right? Co-parenting can involve grandparents, right? It can involve so many other legal guardians and things of that sort. I think we got to take in consideration what that could also mean. I grew up in the South, so one of the things we learned is it takes a village to raise a child, right? And so it's not necessarily just one person that's present. and say another parent is not as present for one reason or another, there's other people that are stepping in to help raise those kids, whether it be an uncle, whether it be an aunt, whether it be those grandparents or somebody else or a close friend that I know. Growing up for me, like, even to today, I got so many nephews and nieces, and because of my brothers, you know what I'm saying? So it's coming into play. And so I think really just taking into consideration that there's different ways of viewing that within itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, with social media being so big, like everybody is sharing their experience. So whatever misconceptions you had about co-parenting is helping shift that narrative. Like
Mhm.
I remember when I was first co-parenting, when I first started, like my kid's mom, she was like, there was a lot of people in her ear about what it should look like. Like we were really, we communicated a lot. We were really close. We talked all the time. And a lot of people was like, oh, well, wait a minute. Are you getting child support? Are you doing this? Are you like, and I was, even though I was like covering most of the expenses, like I was paying like her car note, like I was, but people were in her ear about like what should be happening. Right. And like, it's just like, you can co-parent, co-parenting looks like whatever you want it to look like for you. There's no set standard of what co-parenting is. If you can't communicate and you have to, parallel parent, which is like really not communicate much at all. Or if you are really you doing joint birthday parties, it could be one extreme or the other. Right. So like, I think it's shifting about what just some of the common misconceptions and like things that people thought co-parenting was, more people sharing their experience, and they can see that now.
Coach Anthony, how did your co-parenting begin? Was it always good? Was it always healthy? Talk to us about that.
No, it wasn't always healthy. And that's because I think one of the things people need to understand about co-parenting is that it starts with you. All right. So you got to figure out, and this is what mostly that I'm working on with my clients that we get to, is that how are you getting in your own way? All right. So like with me and my kid's mom, I had to figure out how I was getting in my own way. And when we separated, like I'd come in her apartment and I'm looking around. If things was a mess, I'm like, look, can we like keep it a little bit more clean in here? Like, what's going on? Like, I'm pointing, I'm figuring out where I could point the finger, but it was like a competition, right? And instead of like this collaborative effort. And then when I started to figure out what I needed to change within me, I was like, okay, this is about us working as a team. So if I came and dropped the kids off and I'm helping put them to bed or something like that, I'm helping them pick up. I'm like, hey, let's pick up your room. Let's do something. Or if she's giving them a bath or a shower, I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Right. Like it was like, it went from us pointing fingers at each other to us working together and figuring out how we could support each other. And like that was our big thing in the beginning. It was like, and that was our biggest hurdle, honestly, because like you said, if somebody point a finger at you and telling you what you need to fix, they're gonna find something about you that you need to fix.
How long did that take for you to get into a better space?
For us, fortunately, we were fortunate because for us it didn't take long, right? Like we both had, like, I'm very fortunate to have the mom that I have for my kids because we both always been able to put the kids first, right? We weren't perfect, right? So it started off kind of rocky, right? Because we both had our own stuff that we were working through. But like we always had the mindset of putting the kids first and like, look, whatever happened between us, let's put that aside. And we gonna work on ourselves and we're gonna do whatever we need to do to make sure the kids are okay. So it didn't take long at all, as long as as long as both of us are making the effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know you have heard stories, but the both of you have heard stories about or worked with clients that simply detest the other parent. How do you, I mean, it's real. How do you co-parent with someone that you detest? How do you walk them through, moving away from detesting this parent?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some research that I conducted back in 2016, 2017. And it's actually going to relate a little bit to what Coach Anthony mentioned as well, right? So I wrote an article and did some research on the impact of parental divorce on children's confidence levels. And I was in particularly looking at their confidence levels in romantic relationships, but also in career aspirations. And one of the things I found was that it wasn't the quantity of parent social support that was the most meaningful, but the quality. And one of the things I used to do, I was a divorce educator for the state of Nevada. And one of the things we talked about is that what if other parents want to co-parent? What if they're not running or willing to support, in raising this kid? I used to always have to say, you gotta do the best you can, right? You can't worry about the other parent. And what my research really highlighted was just that whatever energy we're putting into what the other parent is not doing or what they're not doing in our level of satisfaction, right? The house is not clean or something like that. It's taken away what we can be able to pour into our kids, right? And so what research has highlighted is that the quality of care, right? It's not the quantity. It's not both parents or more, 3 or 4. It's the quality. And the more that you can pour into your kids and do the best you can, the better they're going to be able to navigate and adjust positively from those different challenges that they could experience with separation, right? And so that's the importance. The point is doing the best you can as a parent. It's tough, right? When you don't like that other person, or they just making it difficult. And especially when you bring a kid together, and it's so hard to be like, why are we having these issues, right? I think Coach Anthony talked about, like, we always put the kids first, right? We know that it's the importance of us raising our kids and doing the best we can, right? And so we got to figure out how to do this, because it's not about us anymore. It's about our children, right? And so really trying to figure out that challenging aspect of, like, I know they're not doing X, Y, and Z, but anytime you're putting that energy into what they're not doing, you're taking away what more you could do for your kids as well, right?
Yeah.
I think that's super important, right?
Absolutely. Also, to add to that, brother, like, that's good information. Like, putting the kids first, and like, I also think you gotta understand that your kids, they may not see the other parent the same way you see them, right?
Absolutely.
So like, if you're really upset with them, or I think that personal growth and development piece is so important, because getting to the source of why you so angry with them, or why you so upset with them, so you can resolve that. All right. And also understand, like I said, your kids probably don't see them the way you see them. They might not know why you hate them so much. Like, your kids may just love that other person. And if they see you treating them in a way that shows that hate and that anger, it's only going to make your kids, or potentially make your kids, look at you differently. All right. So it's like, that's the whole aspect, like Dr. Lawrence was saying, like, putting the kids first. It's like, this is not about me, right? How are my actions, and how is my behavior? How is it impacting the kids? All right. How are they viewing it? And what do I need to do to resolve this hatred or this anger, so it doesn't impact the way I act or behave, around my kids or to this other person? I don't want to make the situation worse, right?
Yeah. No, that's super key. That's super key. I definitely agree with that 100%. That research has also highlighted that kids can turn resentful, right? I think sometimes we forget that when we have kids together, they're 50% mom, 50% dad, 50% whoever, right? And so when we're talking bad about the other parent around them, kids can internalize that, like, I'm 50% bad, right? Like, we always say, you got your mother's eyes, you're just like your dad, the whole nine. But at the same time, we're talking around the corner, because I always tell parents, when you think your kids are not listening, they are, right? And in those moments when we're talking about the other parent, kids are picking up on that, and they can internalize that, and that can influence their confidence levels. They can influence how they view themselves in the day to day. And so it's extremely important that we as parents as well take that into consideration, that, our kids are a part us, just like they're part the other parent. And the way that we talk about the parent can influence not only how they view them, right for wrong, and later on they may be resentful for that, but also how they view themselves.
Wow. That was good. Thank you. You all are already have gotten to my next question about the selfless work that is involved. Is there one, you said you have to think about the kids and put them first. What other work is involved in becoming selfless in this process of co-parenting?
I think in part we have to adopt the mindset of taking away, it's not us versus them. Gottman has something called Gottman Institute, which is an institute that really focuses on relationships and building and navigating some challenges. And one of the things they talk about is something called the assumption of similarity, and I love it. And the assumption of similarities is simply this, right? If you see something bad in the other person, try to see that bad in you, see something good in yourself, try to see something good in them, right? And what that does is it kind of levels that playing field. I think sometimes when we're not getting along, it's just us versus them. We're right, they're wrong, and we can just be different. It doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and understanding that as a parent, we may have a way that we view ourselves as the best way of doing it, but it doesn't mean that it is the best. It just means that it's different than the other parent. And if you take that mindset that, we're just trying to do this together, we have a different mindsets, different ways of handling this, but we're trying to figure out how to kind of merge this together so we can be the best parents to our kids. I think it takes away that battling standpoint, and now we're on a team, right? I tell my players all the time, right? You can be on offense, you can be on defense with your teammates, right? But you don't want to be on offense and defense at the same point in time, right? Because if you on offense as a point guard and your players on your shooting guards on defense, y'all against each other. Y'all on the same team. So you got to make sure we move in a way that kind of gives us that opportunity. And that's gonna be beneficial for your kids. So I think that's super important to kind of consider that as a way to kind of just figure out how to navigate that challenge.
Yeah.
Coach, you got something else to say?
Yeah, man, I'll add a little bit to that. Like, I think, just what you're saying is perfect, man. And like, it's the ultimate, being a parent, if you really care about it, being a good one, is the ultimate act of selflessness, right? Because you have to continuously like look within yourself and see what you can improve, right? Because you want to be the best version of yourself. You want to be able to handle, right? You don't never know, you're not going to know what's coming all the time, but you want to be best prepared for what comes when it comes to your kids. You want to be the example of what forgiveness looks like, what, unconditional love looks like, all these things, how to handle your anger, your triggers. Like my son is the biggest test of my patience that I've ever had, right? So my 11-year-old son. So if I can either parent him the way I was parented with the iron fist, or I can be more compassionate and learn and understand my triggers and teach him how to manage things better other than getting your butt whooped. Like there's other forms of consequences and discipline and things like that. And that took me learning and growing and being a better version of myself. I had to be selfless in that sense to work on myself for him. Right. And if I'm not very good at expressing my emotions, I need to figure out how to do that for him, for my daughter. Right. Like, so they can see that emotional side of me. They can see that vulnerable side of me. So it's the ultimate self. It's like, you got to continuously work on yourself.
Would you suggest for parents who are recently divorced, would you suggest if there's anger, if there's bitterness, that one of the parents takes some time away from the kids to deal with the anger, deal with the bitterness, deal with the hate? Would you all suggest that? Is that healthy?
That's an interesting question. I'm interested to hear what you say about that, Dr. Lawrence, because I really feel like it's very situational, like and depending on how you, like, you have to do what is necessary for your situation. If you feel like it's negatively impacting your children, maybe it's necessary, right? Maybe you take a look. Maybe you don't take completely remove yourself from it, but maybe they're with the other parent most of the time because your anger, you haven't got a hold of it yet. Right. And like it's simple, you snapping on your kids and and depending on what age your kids are, like, is it age appropriate are your kids teenagers and you can talk to them about like some of the things that's going on with you? Do y'all have that relationship like that where you're like, all right, mommy and daddy's just like, I'm stressed out, just here's how I'm dealing with it, like I don't want it to impact you, like how, I think there's so many factors, man. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that, Doc.
No, yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. And so one of my mottos, man, I live by this. I it's on my website. I share it everywhere, right? I think it's so powerful. Awareness brings the opportunity for change, right? We can't change things that we're not aware of, right? Awareness brings the opportunity for change, but awareness itself doesn't bring about change. Intentionality does. And when I think about this process, it's important to be aware of where you're at as a parent. I think when parents are divorcing, they go through the grief loss cycle. They go through the denials, the anger, the bargaining, depression before they get to acceptance, right? And it's not linear, it's circular for a reason, because you can easily be in one stage longer. You can go to one, be the denial, then go to you think your acceptance, to go back to bargaining, go back to anger. You can maneuver through that. But what's important to know where you're at as a parent first, right? Because your kids are going through their own cycle, depending on their age, even from babies, right? Babies are the most impacted and least impacted at the same time, because kids need the structure, they need the consistency, they need the scheduling, right? But they don't understand maybe the other stuff that could be happening. They can't feel those things. And so understanding where your kids are at within that developmental cycle, whether they're teenagers or early grade school or older, right? Where that is and for them, but also where you're at. And so I think the awareness of where you're at can better help you figure out what you can do as a parent based on your kid's developmental cycle, right? And so if you have a baby that needs discipline, you may be able to step away because, I mean, not discipline, that needs consistency. You may be able to step away because whatever parent has that kid, they need that consistency anyway. They got to eat at a certain time, they got to go to bed at a certain time. So you may be able to do that. But if you have a teenager that wants to be around both the parents all the time, there may be something you got to figure out to navigate a little differently. So what Coach has mentioned about, yeah, I think it's situational. I think it is too, right? Developmentally, where they're at and what they're experiencing. What are some of the things that how that can manifest and kind of influence them, whether they're internalizing it, whether they're externalizing it, right? I think you know your kid's the best in that moment, but also you got to do what's best for you to make sure that you're as available as possible. I tell parents all the time, if you are around, right, if you are not your best self, you're still trying to give your best to your kids. You're giving maybe 80, 60, 40% of you. You're not going to get back to the 100% of you unless you take care of you first, right? We talk about it all the time. You get on the plane, they always say, man, put your oxygen mask on yourself before you help somebody else. The reason being is because if I don't have it on myself and I'm trying to help all the kids in the row, and all of a sudden I pass out and they can't put it on their own self, we all dead. Versus me prioritizing me to make sure I can take care of everybody else around me. And sometimes we're trying to pour from a cup that's empty because we're so used to pouring it to others. And when we're doing that, we're actually not being the best parent that we can be for our kids. And that's a harsh reality to swallow, right?
Yeah.
That me not take care of myself, I'm influencing and impacting how great of a parent I can be, how great of a partner I can be, how great of a therapist or whoever coach we can be. And so really understanding that until we take care of ourselves, we're not gonna be able to better support and pour into our people that are around us, including our children.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing, man. I love that. Like the pouring into yourself part, because I think some people might go through a situation like that and honestly believe within their hearts that maybe they need to take some time to themselves, but then they will judge themselves as a parent and say, well, I can't do that because I'm a mom or I'm a dad and I got responsibilities and I can't do that. I can't do that. And my kids need me. But however, if you have a solid co-parent that can pick up some of the slack and you need to do some self-care, take care of yourself. So then you can show up for your kids in the best way possible. Right. So yeah, I love that, man.
Absolutely. Dr. Lawrence, you spoke about navigating the structure. How do both parents navigate the structure in their household where they both are mirroring each other? As far as, it's time to go to bed, it's time to read, it's time to do studying, it's time for no phone at this time. Or talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think consistency is key, right? I think sometimes we don't recognize, and this is just our culture, right? And so I hope as I share this, I don't want anybody to necessarily feel some type of way about it, but our kids have to experience the biggest adjustment when we separate. They go to that one house to the other. They got some clothes here. They got different ways of going to school, right? And we as human beings are creatures of habit, right? We don't like when we feel out of control. We don't like when our worlds get twisted and turned upside down. Pandemic showed us that first and foremost. When I can't find toilet paper, I can't travel, I got to cancel my plans, right? We didn't like that. We panicked. And so if we struggle with that as parents, as adults, imagine what our kids have to struggle with navigating, going back and forth, having this day at this parent, make sure I brought this homework, or this person's taking me to practice. It's hard to be on the same page when you add more more cooks in the kitchen, right? It just is. But it's the reality of our culture, it's reality of our society within the Western society which we live in within the US, right? And so given that, we got to do the best we can to make sure that we're making or having open communication and sharing these things so we can better navigate that for our kids, right? And so they already have a big adjustment. Our job as parents is to lessen that adjustment factor for them. And if we can have that consistent, we can do that mirroring. We can have them, hey, we're just consistent rules, consistent routine across the board. We're able to give them that consistency that they're looking for. But in order to do that, we have to communicate with the other parent, right? And we got to figure out what it's like to be on the same page on something like that. And that's where I think therapy can come into play. There's a lot of parents I see that are not together and they're trying to navigate the co-parenting. Or coach, I know you probably work with them as well, right? Trying to help them navigate the co-parenting. How do we do this the best way that they can? Given that they're different, given that there may be some other stuff with the relationship that really is still upsetting, that kind of serve as an undertone to how we maneuver as parents, right? How do we move forward that so that we can prioritize our kids and make sure that we give them the consistency that they need, whether they have a 2-parent household or 1 parent, right? And so really trying to figure out what that looks like. And I think communication is key. I think it's really, as coaches mentioned earlier, the importance of taking the consideration of, I got to put these kids first. Yeah, I'm hurting. Yeah, I'm upset. Yeah, I'm angry. Yeah, I don't like that this person's not doing what they need to do in the capacity in which I think they need to. But I got to make sure that I'm doing the best I can to lessen the adjustment factor for my kids, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think in the process, you also got to have some empathy and some compassion for what your kids are going through, right? As an adult, how many times you gone to the gym and forgot your water bottle? How many times you gone to the office and forgot a notebook that you need at the house? Like, it's like, and I think a lot of parents are putting unrealistic expectations on their kids, right? So like they got to bounce back and forth. And like, I see parents get mad at their kids because they forgot like they soccer cleats or something at their own parents' house. Like, I told you to make sure you had all your stuff. Like, look, they kids, right? Like me and my kids' mom have decided like certain things are on us, right? We make sure that all her soccer stuff is in the bag, and we switch that out between houses. We do that, right? We make sure, like, because it's like, I don't know, you just got to be realistic, and if you can't communicate, like, because some parents can't communicate, right? You want to have, like Dr. was saying, you want to have that consistency in communication as much as you possibly can. But if you cannot, then you just have to really just use your best judgment, right? And you really have to get help if you need it. That's why that's so important that you get counseling or coaching, right? Like, because all these situations are so nuanced and they're just different across the board, right? So if you can't figure it out and you're having a hard time, get help. You don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
To that point, coach, therapy, counseling, coaching, that's a resource, right? And I think at any point in stage, I tell people all the time, if you come to therapy, you can come to therapy because you're failing, need a pass, C, make a B, B, make an A, continue to keep it, right? It's kind of like tutoring in that fashion. Some people go to therapy because they're struggling, they're in crisis mode. Some people go on because they want to continue to improve as a person or human being, whatever the case may be. And so it's a resource at any time you can tap into it. And I think it's important to recognize and know that these resources are around us, right? It's okay to know that we don't have all the answers. It's okay to know that we need support. There's nothing wrong with that. And if we're able to utilize these resources around us, our kids are going to be better for it. And not only that, we're going to be better for it. I think the other thing people sometimes can get a misconstrued perception about is that I got 18 years, right? I think your kid don't want you at their graduations, they weddings, they, what I'm saying, all the life accomplishments. It's not just 18 years. Being a parent is lifelong, right? Navigating that relationship with that co-parent is lifelong. So you got to get to it now, right? If we're gonna do it, you might as well put in the work now to make it as best as it can. It may not be that perfect 10. It may only get to a 6 or a 7, but guess what? We can work towards that 6 or 7 and get to it now. So our kids can benefit from that. And we can benefit as well as co-parents through that process now, instead of waiting throughout their journey and having a lot of pain, hurt, and challenges and tribulations through it as well.
You all said so much so far, and I thank you for that. Are there any more rules or tips? I hate to say rules, but tips for co-parenting to our Black fathers?
I'll say this. I'll say like I think you got to be able to give yourself some grace, and I think empathy is such a big point. And I think like if you have not just Black fathers, but if you're a father and like you didn't have your father around, you got to be careful by which metric you compare yourself to, right? Because like when I first had my kids, I was comparing myself to my father, right, who wasn't around, right, and it was like, oh, by his standard, I was doing great, right? I'm comparing myself to him, but I had to actually look at fathers that I wanted to be like, and I wanted to, follow and do the things they were doing and compare myself to them. Like, all right, here's the standard. What standard am I measuring myself by? And also understanding like, man, for Black fathers, like we come from like heal whatever trauma that you need to heal within yourself. Like I'm a firm believer in like one of my jobs as a parent is not to let my stuff spill over onto my kids. All right. So whatever my stuff is, I got to deal with my stuff. And if I don't even know what it is, I need to be active and seeking out. Like I got to be intentional, like you were saying, Dr. Jones. I got to be intentional about seeking it out. What are my barriers to my own progress and my own success? So I don't let that spill over onto my kids. I could say a lot more about that, but in short, that's what I would say.
Coach Anthony, man, when I say you took the words out of my mouth with the grace, right? When you said, I was like, oh, well, I got to figure something else because that's so big, right? I think when you think about grace, I think we struggle with that. And I think why we struggle with that is because we're used to showing other people grace and not ourselves, right? What I mean by that is, you think about as a kid, right? If your parent told you you're playing with another kid, and your parents like told you give them some grace, what they're asking is forgive them in a moment, right? Forgive them in a moment, and have hope that things would change or they would do something different over time, right? FGH is real close in the alphabet for a reason, right? Forgiveness, grace, hope. I think they're all kind of tied together. They're all kind of interrelated. And we're always taught we got to love ourselves before we show a love to other people. But we're not taught that we got to give grace to ourselves before we give grace to other people. We learn the opposite. We give grace to other people first, and then we maybe, as an adult or something, learn about grace for ourselves. And as Black men who have so many challenges, it's so easy not to give ourselves grace and try to continue to push forward because we don't want to be complacent. We don't want to be still. And so if I'm harder on myself, right, I think I'm going to get the best out of myself. But sometimes that can be the downfall. And sometimes we have to give ourselves grace. And what we mean by giving ourselves grace, we have to learn to forgive ourselves from our shortcomings, right? We make the best decisions with the information we have at the time in which we have it, and in the moments and situations in which we got it to do so, right? With the resource around us. We're upset about a decision we made 5 years ago when we didn't know better. We got to give ourselves forgiveness. We got to give ourselves some grace, right? And if we do that, we're giving ourselves hope. There's some of my clients that come to me to be like, yeah, Doc, I don't know about this grace thing. I struggle with giving myself that. I don't know how I feel about that. If I ask them, okay, but do you struggle with giving yourself hope? Right? They think a little bit more about that because grace and hope are so tied and close together, right? Grace is nothing but a type of forgiveness that gives yourself hope. If you can't give yourself grace, then you're not giving yourself hope. If you're not giving yourself hope, you can be stagnant, you can be stuck. So it's so important to be able to figure out how to navigate those challenges given those circumstances. So grace is super huge as a parent, particularly as a Black father. We got to give ourselves that. And to Coach Anthony's point again, the importance of empathy and compassion, not only for yourself, but for your kids is so important, right? We have an issue when we're raising our kids that they don't have the emotional availability, capacity to describe what's going on for them, right? We grew up in a house, we grew up in a world of happy, sad, mad, angry. If it's not that, we don't know what it is, right? There's so much more today. We have so much more information. We have so much more awareness. I didn't know what envy looked like. I didn't know what envy versus jealousy. I didn't know what that looked like, how to navigate it, how to cope with it, until I did some work within ourselves, right? And so a tip that I often give our Black fathers is something called emotional will. You can Google it. There's so many. You can take a picture of it. It's a way that you can better understand what category your emotions fall under and better understand what exactly you're feeling. Because you may be anger, you may be experiencing angry, but you're hurt. You're hurt. And you can't describe that hurt If you can't name that hurt, then how are you gonna be able to deal with it? How are you gonna be able to address
Mm-hmm.
it? And so understanding your emotions, simplifying ourselves. I always say all the time, we're not complicated, we're just complex. Being able to better understand our complexities of who we are, but understanding the emotions in which we experience them, we can better learn how to cope with them. And if we
Yeah.
do that, social learning theory says we're gonna be better able to teach that to our kids. And our kids are gonna be able to pick those things up as well.
Yeah. That's dope. And the last thing, I'll piggyback one more thing off of that. I realized that I found it harder to forgive myself because I was still struggling with relationships in my own life where I hadn't forgiven people.
Mm.
Right. And like,
Mm,
once I was able to, like, I don't know, once I was able to forgive like my father, all right,
yeah,
and you know, my parents or whatever, they nonsense, right? And just the people around me, and have more empathy and compassion for the people around me, I was able to do it better for myself too. And
yeah,
and just stop judging people and just like, look, man, everybody got their own stuff going on. Right?
sure,
So that grace, man, it's a big piece. It's a big piece.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So hard, particularly as Black men. Man, it's so hard to give ourselves some grace because we feel like we give ourselves some grace, we can be complacent, we can be stuck because we
Yeah.
always trying to be better, right? I grew up in a household, my brother's like, if you want to get noticed, it'd be twice as good, right? Mediocrity doesn't work in
Mm-hmm.
this household, right? And so finding a way to always push to do more and more, but also be able to be present and just
Mm-hmm.
accept what you received or accept what you've done, right? That's tough. But we're trying to run a sprint. We're in a marathon. If we
Yeah.
don't give ourselves grace, we're running a sprint in a marathon. If we sprint in a marathon, we're gonna run out of gas eventually. So we gotta give ourselves grace to kind of pace ourselves, slow ourselves down, so we can get a little jog in there, so that we can go further and longer.
Mm-hmm. And get that coaching and counseling. Like, I'm gonna plug that, right, because sometimes it's
Yeah.
hard to find that balance of
Yep.
grace and pushing myself, right? Like, so sometimes I'm giving myself grace and I'm just making an excuse when I need to be working. All right.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah, I've given myself grace, but okay, yeah, but you kind of bullshitting over here, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
let's 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 pick it up, right? So don't give yourself help. Have good people in your life, in your circle, and you could bounce ideas off of you. If you got a counselor, a coach, a therapist, good people around you, so you can help keep your mindset right. You know where you're going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
You all mentioned the therapists, the coaches, and things of that nature. Are there any support groups that you would like to recommend to our Black fathers that they can connect with? No?
I have my Facebook group that I have for co-parenting fathers.
Okay.
So it's just if you look up co-parenting fathers on Facebook, you find a Facebook group. It's a private group just for men.
Good.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep it that way for as long as it exists. Just for men to have a place where they can come, and like, I'm the only admin for the group. It's like closing in on 1,000 members right now, and I'm the only admin for
Nice.
the group. So like, I approve every single person that comes to that group. Like,
Awesome.
I look at their profile, make sure it's like, and
Yeah.
so yeah, man. That's Other than that, man.
Awesome.
Yeah. I think, Coach Anthony, I was waiting because I knew you want to plug that. That's a resource right there. I think because it's so interesting when we are able to congregate as Black men, how vulnerable, how honest, how authentic those conversations can be, right? And so finding moments where we can be able to embrace that and experience that is super key. In Vegas, we have something called it's called a Black men's talk room, right? It's once a month. Black men come together and they just talk about the challenges, talk about as a parent, as a partner, in the workplace, how the world perceives us, right? All the types of things. Those things are so important.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes we kind of view it as barber talk, barbershop talk, right? There's been a couple of times I've done a couple of events in a barbershop because that's when we have some of these real conversations, right? And we talk about so many other things, but sometimes it can be very real. I'm a big component of taking trips with your guys, to doing things if you can together, just away from everything, because those are opportunities where that can happen. I think you got to have the space to do it in some cases, right? And I'll talk about the intentionality. You got to be intentional about making that possible, but
Sure.
finding space in which that can happen, whether it be through social media, whether it be the Black Men Cans, the Black Menswear. They got flash mobs. They have group me groups, and they still kind of can talk ways from city to city, where you can just kind of connect with other Black men that are trying to navigate these similar spaces that you are, or the Black Men Heals. The organizations out there that are really focused on making sure that we're healing as Black individuals, particularly as Black fathers, right?
Yeah.
As Black role models in our society. So I think if you can find something locally, absolutely. I like to be present with those things, have these present conversations. They're more authentic, they're more genuine. But there's other resources on a larger scale that you can at least begin to see and experience spaces where people are like you that are trying to do the same things that you're trying to do as well.
Yeah. And if you're skeptical about like going out and finding a resource, create your own. Right? Yeah. Like I started a dad chat, like it was just with my group of friends, my core group of friends. I called it a dad chat. We did every other Sunday. Right? We just hop on a Zoom call because I had boys in Wisconsin and New York and Maryland, DC. We just hopped on a Zoom call every other Sunday, and we just called it a dad chat, and we just chopped it up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and if we would talk about, I would always have a topic, right? That if we didn't have nothing to talk about, but we always find something to talk about. At minimum, we always laughed.
Yeah.
Right. Like at minimum, we always got on there, laughed, joked. It was beneficial to everybody. But like I started getting more busy, and like nobody else wanted to organize it. Right. Like, so like I was a main organizer, but like, I'm like, man, I got stuff going on. So like, if anybody else want to take the lead on this, I'm gonna be like, man, the boys are slacking. But like, if you that guy in your group, man, or your group of friends that you can organize some things, man, just tell boys to hop on the Zoom chat, send out a Zoom link to everybody, and like, man, hop on it one night, every other Sunday or something like that, once a month, just so boys could chop it up, talk about what's going on in their life. Man, boys would talk about everything, and it was therapeutic for them.
Absolutely.
That's good. Coach Anthony, I don't think anyone has ever asked this question before, but what's fun about co-parenting?
Nobody has ever asked me that question before.
Yeah.
What's fun about co-parenting is, I think the fun part, and I think people need to see this as a fun part, is you actually get time to explore some things you want to do for yourself. Right? Like, so like you don't have your kids all the time. Right. And people look at that as like, oh, I don't have my kids, and like I don't know what I'm gonna do without my kids. Like, find yourself outside of being a parent, outside of being a mother or a father. You actually get time to find yourself and start doing the things that you used to love to do. And just, I don't know. And what's fun about it, if you want to look at it from this perspective, right, is that it forces you to work together. It forces you to be a teammate and collaborate, and like it forces you to grow. So you can look at that from an aspect of, oh yeah, you know what, this is fun. I'm learning about myself, and that's a really growth mindset type way to look at it. But I think those two aspects about it is, it can be fun, man. And my kid's mom, she's very intentional, and she's helped me be intentional about like taking photos of like the kids and me and the kids together, and like sharing them and stuff like that. And like, I don't know, if you're working together, you can make it fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Gentlemen, that is our time. Before we go, tell our listeners how they can connect with you, starting with Dr. Lawrence.
Absolutely. You can definitely find me via my website, theblackmaletherapist.com. From there, if you scroll down to the bottom, you have my social links for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Instagram is @theblackmaletherapist. As well, if you're interested in services, whether it be through individual, couple, or family therapy, or sports performance, if you are elite athletes, or families just trying to navigate those challenges, or navigating other challenges as well, feel free to reach out. If you want any training or any other consulting as well, that is the place to find me at theblackmaletherapist.com.
Thank you. Coach Anthony.
So my website is www.coparentingjourney.com. You can find me on my social media links as well. I'm pretty active on TikTok at the Co-Parenting Coach, and Instagram at AJ the Co-Parenting Coach. And you can find my links to if you go anywhere you go, you can find my links to all of my things. It's kind of like a link tree, but it's called direct.me. And it takes you to my podcast, to my website, some of my social media links and things like that. So yeah, just reach out. There's so many ways, there's so many forms to connect these days. So anyway, I'll do it whatever form is most comfortable for people.
Thank you for highlighting your experiences and your expertise. This has truly been a valuable conversation. Thank you for also doing your part in changing the narrative. And lastly, for keeping your commitment by being a part of this conversation. That means a lot. For merch, visit iChangeTheNarrative.org. Thank you to our sponsors, So Organic, So Suave. You can follow Sauce on Instagram. For the latest in product news and updates, visit www.sossd.co. Don't forget to follow us on TikTok and subscribe to our YouTube channel at iChangeTheNarrative. That's all one word. We've added a weekday pop-up segment. We'll see you next time, same place, for more great show and more great conversation. Thank you all so much for listening.